Well, Zach, I think this is going to either be the best or the worst podcast episode that we have ever recorded.
I think so, Gabe. We are way out of our element right now. It is 8 a.m. and we usually do these in like the late afternoons, and it's a Friday. There was some news from the Supreme Court that they will uphold the law that TikTok will be potentially banned. So there's a lot going on right now. This is the now third take of the podcast this morning too. So we are all kinds of shaken up today.
Oh my goodness, it's been a heck of a start to the day, man. That is for sure. Yeah, the TikTok piece is very interesting, and I want to caveat this that we are not touching the political component of the TikTok ban with a 354-foot pole, right? Like I do not want to get into that conversation at all. But what I do think is very interesting is the implications for marketers that this is going to have for 2025.
I agree. And Gabe, I think it just goes back to the conversation of where do your customers, your subscribers, your prospect, whomever, where do your customers consume your content? And, perhaps that's on TikTok today, or perhaps that's still on, the Instagrams, the Meta platforms. But again, asking that question. And I made the joke, Gabe. I said, well, we started out with Vine and then we moved to YouTube and then people moved to Instagram and then TikTok kind of thing. I feel like a lot of creators kind of just follow that money trail. But
Hmm.
I feel like we're going full circle now. We're going to go from TikTok all the way back to Vine. Hopefully, I think Elon could plug Vine back in, and we'd be good to go.
Do you think the servers are just like sitting there somewhere for Vine and they just need to be like spun back up in a data center?
I've always wondered like what happened to like that code, or like could they just not to say like plug in the server and spin it back up, but surely they could maybe update a few IP addresses and have that content hosted somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, I know you loved that product, and I know you were very
six
sad and
second
proud.
video escape.
Oh,
That was prime because now I don't know. The content on TikTok's been very unique lately. I think my big hot take of like, oh, finally this is banned is like the people that go on live and just like beg for like fake internet money, like points all day. I think that just like annoys me. But TikTok has been a fun app, and it's been one of those apps where a lot of creators go online and start up their channels from scratch, get those views, and
hmm.
um, I remember there's one TikTok creator. It's someone's grandpa of all people, but like every Monday he releases a milkshake recipe, and every Friday a float and things like that. And I stumbled upon him on TikTok, but I thought, what other app would you be able to create this content at any stage in your life and have millions of views? But the funny thing, and this goes back to where do people consume your content, is for the past week, just about every video I've seen on TikTok that people have created is basically saying, hey, go follow me on Instagram or YouTube.
Hmm.
And it keeps pointing back to those two platforms. And again, what kind of content are you creating is a question, but I think it just shows us that short form video is not dying. And Gabe, there was a
No.
statistic from HubSpot, I believe it was, that even showed that that's where a lot of marketers are still going to invest a lot of their time and resources in 2025 with that short form content.
I think to me that's one of the big takeaways here, right? To me, there's two big takeaways with everything that's happening with the potential application ban and people moving back to these other apps. So that's the first one, Zach. Short form video is not going away. It's pretty clear that people really enjoy that type of content. There's been obviously this explosion of TikTok, and so many people using that application. But you see obviously Meta with Instagram and Facebook Reels, and YouTube with Shorts, and even LinkedIn with some of the video things that they're doing now. It's pretty obvious that these companies are trying to push more and more short form video, and consumers seem to really enjoy it because they're consuming it in massive quantities. So that part of it is not going away. The applications are just likely to change in where people are consuming that content.
Every time I think of like the LinkedIn short form video, all I can think of, and I hate to say it, Gabe, because we've talked about exploring that. All I
Hmm.
can think of is how long before like LinkedIn kills this off, kind of thing.
Oh,
Because I don't know
that
if
would
you've
be
seen the
hilarious.
content on there, but there's some of it where it's like the very like cringy, inspirational, motivational like music in the background, and what I learned from B2B sales or whatever. But it's just such a unique way to consume short form video content on LinkedIn. I'm curious to see what happens. Not to like say it's bad or good or one way or the other, but I'm just interested to see where they take this.
I'm curious about it too. It's, as you said, we've been looking into it a little bit, trying to determine, is that something where we want to start posting some of our clips? And it does, but every time I go there, it's so cringy, and it just, I go, God, my God, am I going to be cut? Do I do I really want to be a person who's posting short form video into this hellscape of LinkedIn, LinkedIn vertical video? But
There's a lot
anyway,
of cringe on YouTube. I think one of my favorites game was we used to send these quite a bit, but it was like I, I just split up with my wife. Here's what B2B sales taught me, like things like that. I'm like, this is
so
so bad. People
terrible.
need to stop.
Yes. Well, I've told you this before. So one of my favorite Reddit, so you've got me hooked on Reddit, which thank you. But one of my favorite Reddit threads is LinkedIn lunatics. And it is just absolute peak humanity of complete insanity, where people are posting stuff on LinkedIn that is either wildly inappropriate for a business setting, or just that super cringy, yeah, my wife left me and this is what it taught me about B2B sales. And it just makes me laugh every
Hey, I'm glad you're using Reddit though, because Reddit is still one of my
time.
favorite websites. So I'm glad you're still hooked there.
Well, I feel like I've been forced down this path, because anytime I search for something now, I
Reddit.
feel like Reddit is one of the first things that pops up. And to be fair, it's actually generally pretty helpful. So I can't really
Okay.
complain.
I used to tell this to my team here at Calyx Cave, and people would like give me the eye roll kind of thing. But when you're looking for like user feedback or like reviews, or I don't want to say like I don't want to go as far as saying like life advice. I'd be like, just Google it and just type in Reddit. So you search the Reddit
Hmm.
site and see what you respond, because like it's a great way. Even like if you look at like social listening and things like that, what do people say about your product, your brand, so on, so on. Punch it into Reddit and see what people are saying. You might even find people with, yeah, we work in the broadband space. I've seen so many like, hey, I have, XYZ fiber. Why is
Yes.
my internet so broken all the time? Kind of thing. You see these questions, and there's opportunity there for you as the company to come in and engage with these people as well. But Reddit is just a great place for people to, I don't want to say like share their experiences. One of the things I've been
No,
looking at
I think
lately.
that's a good way to describe it, Zach. They are sharing their experiences, and in many ways, it's almost like a review site.
Yeah, and the credibility is kind of what I was questioning there too. But
Mm,
one of the things I've been looking at, and not an endorsement, I don't use this yet. I'm planning on it, but there's a product called Comma AI, and you essentially mount it on the front of your car. I think I sent this to you, Gabe. I can't remember,
you
and
did.
it does kind of like an. I'm not going to say self-driving. I'm very very cautious with my words here, but it does like an enhanced lane keeping for your vehicle, depending on
Hmm.
what model you have. And of course, me being interested in tech, I'm like, well, this is interesting. I got to try this out. So the first thing I did was I went to Reddit and just to see what people said about this. And there was a lot of positive reviews and people talking about how to install it or what they've found and the software limitations, things like that. But I mean, that's just the latest thing of a product I had heard of, I was interested in. I went straight to Reddit, and now I'm
Hmm.
reading story after story of people using these and even watching video. Again, going back to that video comment with TikTok, Reddit's a great place to grab video content as well. Now, of course, it's not like a video only platform, so
Right.
it's not their primary goal, but it does exist. So nothing
Well,
but
it's funny you
positive
say
things
that,
to say
Zach,
about
about the
Reddit.
video, and even pictures. One of the things that I've noticed with some of the threads that I follow on Reddit is when I see something with an image or a video in it, I'm much more likely to engage with that post versus it just being text. If it's just like a wall of text and there's no other media on it, I'm much less likely to click on that post and engage.
This is funny. So like we're gonna go 10 years ago, back in high school. So like when Reddit kind of like when I started using Reddit, I don't want to say when it became a thing, but when I started using it, they didn't have like a built-in like image hosting on Reddit. So like if you
Hmm.
wanted to post an image, you would go to a site like I think it's Imgur. Imager. I don't know how to say that, Imgur. But you would upload your photos there and then link it back to Reddit. And then like in your body post on Reddit, you would just like have these links to your images, right? And now in 2025, when I see those posts, I'm less likely to engage with them because
Hmm.
I don't want to leave the app. I don't want to leave the site. Whereas when it's all contained, that's a great experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I I think this is a really good transition into a topic we wanted to discuss today, which is user generated content and how brands are engaging with that. However, I want to pause for just a sec because I want to circle back to one other thing speaking about TikTok and the transition to other platforms really quick, and then let's jump back into user generated content. So the kind of second part of this potential TikTok ban or impending TikTok ban, whatever we want to call it, is this is why it's so important to have direct ways to connect with your customers and prospects, because these applications can change on a whim. They can go away. Vine, TikTok, they can decide to change the algorithm. Meta's done this 1,000 times. Zach, you and I have even
Limited
noticed
API
this.
access was a huge one last year too.
Correct. That's a great point, right? And some of the changes that were happening with, that have happened with Meta Ads Manager, with, Apple back in the day, and things like that as well. We've even seen it a little bit with some of the impacts of views on YouTube Shorts for us, right? Like there's changes that can happen in the algorithms for these applications that you have absolutely no control over as a marketer. And so that's why it's so important to have this direct relationship with your customers and leverage that direct relationship outside of the applications that you're using to market to them as well.
Absolutely. And Gabe, we are 3 weeks into 2025, which is kind of like weird to say, where did the year go?
Yeah.
But no, 2025 was exhausting. But I think a couple of things we should talk about today is not so much the broader trends, but more trends around like content and social media.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah. And circle back to the user generated content piece, because I think that really plays nicely off of what you were talking about with Reddit and frankly some of these other applications as well. I'm curious to hear your opinion on this, just because you're obviously in a little bit of a different age demographic than I am. I feel like your age group very much looks to user generated content and more original content as a way to understand, is this a product or service that I should be engaging with, much more so than my generation and above.
I feel like we're all about user generated content. One of the things to when I think of user generated content, I think of how brands interact with user generated content, or even like the trending content. Like we all know there's always a popular trend going around. I actually don't know what that trend is right now, so I'm way out of the loop. But brands interacting with the creators, or if you like go to the comments section, and one of my favorites was like Hulu commented on a video, and like one of the top comments was, "What is Hulu doing here?" Like just things like that. But I think users are going out creating their own content, and then oftentimes they're promoting a brand in some case or whatever. But and then having that interaction between the brand and the users is great. And this goes back to the definition of social media is, again, we've talked about this probably years ago on the podcast, which is also tough to say years ago on the podcast, but here we are in 2025, is just making sure that if you have a social media presence, it's not just a static page that you post on once a week or twice a month, right? Like engage with your audience and engage with that user generated content. Your subscribers, Gabe, you work in broadband, they're using your service to publish this content. I think there's a plenty of opportunity there.
Yeah, totally agree. And that was you had sent me a report from Hootsuite, Zach, around, kind of social media trends for 2025. And that was really one of the things that jumped out to me as I was reading through the report, is how brands are engaging with those posts from creators or others, right? Just even people out in the world, and how they're kind of jumping into the comments. And it's a balance, because obviously you still need to be thoughtful about your brand guidelines and how you're engaging. You don't want to offend and things like that. But people, the word that kept coming up in there was unhinged, which I thought was sort of funny. But there are some brands who are really taking this to the extreme, right? Mm-hmm. And really starting to get unhinged in some of the comments. And there's a reason for that. They're just trying to obviously gain attention, but there's a balance there. One of the examples that was talked about in the Hootsuite one was MasterCard. And, the MasterCard forever has had this advertising campaign around priceless, right? The things that you can't buy. And what they've started doing is to set up social listening to look for, like, let's say I went and bought the example that they used was a kid went out and bought his dad tickets to the World Series. And it was this post that was kind of blowing up and people were talking about it, and so they jumped into the comments and were like, now that's a priceless moment or something like that, right? Clearly leaning into the thing that probably everybody knows about MasterCard. But I just thought that was a really interesting way for them to engage on a post like that without necessarily selling their products, but still tying themselves back to that moment.
Exactly. I just remembered what the latest trend was. I see it on X, formerly known as Twitter, all the time. But apparently, and I didn't actually know this, but if you like long press on your phone, like a photo, you can load it in 4K resolution. So now
Interesting.
everyone, it's like it's gotten annoying, to be honest, but like everyone's like posting pictures and like tap and hold in 4K. But now brands are doing it. So like the last one I saw was Delta, and they had like a couple planes in the sky, and of course all they say is like tap and load in 4K kind of thing. And then I do see like the people just like totally messing around where they take like a super low resolution image, it's like blurry, you can't see, and like tap and load in 4K, and obviously nothing happens. But I think that's another example of brands kind of hopping in on that latest trend, the Delta example. And I mean, really, I don't want to say anything mean about loading content in 4K, but it's arguably a useless feature in my opinion. But everyone's hopping on it. If you open up your X feed, you're guaranteed to see one of those posts this week.
That's interesting. That is something. Speaking of X, that I have noticed is you see a lot more brands in the comments of specific posts. I've just noticed that just in general, you're seeing more and more of that where somebody will post something and then obviously there's a bunch of comments on that thread and there's a lot of brands kind of popping in there, and it does start to, especially if obviously the post is relevant to the product or service that you're selling. And it doesn't even have to be that you're trying to jump in and sell a product or service. It can just be that you're commenting on the post, quote unquote, as the brand. And it starts to, get you associated with, with the things that particular group is talking about.
Yeah. And I want to comment more about how brands can leverage these social channels and, perhaps what customers and prospects would want to see from these brands and these channels. But before we go to that, I want to circle back to some of these user generated content conversations we're having.
Yeah.
We talked about the authenticity and the visual storytelling. Gabe, you kind of alluded to that here at the beginning of the podcast a little bit too, with the Reddit example.
Yeah. So again, I'm much more likely to engage with a post on Reddit that has other media, that has pictures, that has videos, something like that. So that visual storytelling is taking over for, just a text heavy, thread. I even see it on, like LinkedIn posts and things like that I do. If there's an image or a video, it's going to get much more engagement versus me just throwing out a wall of text and talking about something that happens to be kicking around in my brain. So it's across the spectrum, right? People are engaging. We're a visual. We respond very positively to visuals, right? We're visual people, and so when we see those visuals, whether it's photos, whether it's video, we're going to be much more likely to engage with that content versus just a wall of text.
And that takes me back to a lot of the ads I see and even receive in the mail. I should have brought some for like show and tell here, but I still got a lot of digital ads that focus on, if I use my broadband examples, it's like a postcard wall of text. It's all text saying like, hey, you get, this paragraph of, whatever, and then at this price. And I've never been a huge fan of that because every big player that is trying to sell me broadband comes out with the same message. It's all this text that doesn't really make sense to the average consumer. And then you have this big, dollar sign front and center kind of thing. Same with the mail, the same postcard thing, same like little credit card looking thing you get in the mail, talking about all of this text heavy information with the price next to it. And I think there's opportunity here, especially in the broadband space, Gabe, with the folks we work with, to do things a bit more creative, especially in a digital space. Because if you're in a digital space, you don't have to do the static image and the static text in your advertising. So I know, Gabe, we've got some good examples lined up of people maybe doing something a bit more creative than your traditional text and price. And the last thing I want to say is in college, I took a class, it was history of American advertising, I think it was, or something like that. And we all the way back. But I think a lot of this comes from like back in the day, like not even your day, Gabe, like way back in the day, like newspaper advertising, that's what you did. It was just text and price, right?
Hmm.
But now you don't have to do that. And I think that's the big thing we should be leaning into is this whole static content is not going to be as insightful or as engageable. Is that a word? Like people can't engage with this content like
Yes.
they do with video and some of these more interactive formats.
Hmm. Yeah, and I see it, Zach. I'm sure you see this too. I end up spending a lot of time on broadband service providers' social media sites, just looking through, what it is that they're posting, and you end up kind of scrolling through and like seeing what are the posts that are getting engagement. It's not the ones that are walls of text, right? Or, just random updates around things. It's the ones that are engaging, that are fun, that kind of take these things in a slightly different direction. Those are the ones that are getting engagement. And so we see that every single day. I don't know. I don't know how much time, I spent probably more time doing this when I was in success than I do now, but I would spend a lot of time in doing that when I was working with customers and clients and as a success manager, going through and trying to understand what was getting engagement.
I was really hoping you were going to quantify that because I was interested to see how much time Gabe spends. But the last thing on this I want to just talk about before we talk about some examples is when I created content for social, the content that always did the best without fail was number one video, but
Hmm.
also video with employees in, and we took a more I don't want to say comical approach, but we took a more laid back, fun approach to some of the video content we created, whether it was like recreating video trends or things of that nature. But I think that just goes back to the people you have on your staff that maybe recognize in your community, the influencer, for a lack of a better term.
Yeah,
I think there's
absolutely.
still a lot of opportunity there, especially when it comes to video, especially when it comes to someone within your organization, within your community that is well known, well respected, that kind of thing. I,
Hmm.
I I used to hate saying influencer because when you say influencer, everyone immediately thinks of, oh, Mr. Beast with
Hmm.
200 million views or followers on Instagram, kind of like that's not. I mean, that is an influencer, but it's not the same um,
No, it's not
on
the
this
same
level.
scale as what we're talking about, but that's okay, right? Just
Everyone
because you
has an
don't have
influencer.
exactly, and just because you don't have 200 million followers on Instagram doesn't mean that you still can't be an influencer, right? There are going to be key people in your communities that you can lean into. Zach, I think your point about employees and those trusted folks in the community is a perfect example, and that actually leads me nicely. I had sort of a list here. I'm going to jump down to the bottom of that list. So, um, we had Russell from YK Communications on the podcast a few months ago, and he was talking about Bark and some of the things that they had done there. But they have a really cool social presence, especially with video. They get very creative with their videos. They do really fun commercials. Russell is not afraid to like push the envelope of just silliness and ridiculousness to get his point across. They had a great one it was a few months ago, a couple of months ago. They were launching outdoor Wi-Fi, and they had this really fun cut of like different people in the different employees talking about different use cases, and then at the end of every clip, it was like the person was going to swear, but then they just go to the next clip. It was really fun and really kind of a little bit on the edge, but like it was really really fun. I ended up going to their Facebook page last night just to kind of see like how much engagement did that video get. It had thousands of views, way more than kind of their normal video content. So it's clear that that was something that resonated with people because it was a little bit edgy, it was super fun, and it was just really creative. And it was a great. I really encourage people to go check out YK Communications Facebook page, go to the video tab and just kind of check out some of the things that they do. They do a really, really good job with leaning into the fun aspects of video.
Was this the same BSP that did like a musical ad at one point too? I seem to remember
I'm pretty
this.
sure they did. Yeah.
I
Like I said, Russell doesn't screw around, man. Like he is definitely down to push the
I
envelope on
love that kind
stuff.
of thing. And Gabe, we were talking about this on LinkedIn yesterday, specifically around. I think we were talking about like call to actions versus call to outcomes. That's tough to say, but one of the things I mentioned was like basically stop doing what everyone else is doing, right? Because I think I see this a lot in the broadband space too. But everyone tries to market their services the same way,
Hmm.
and it may work, it may not work, but it's boring. So don't be boring was the message we have. Don't
Yep.
be everyone else in your marketing.
Yeah. Yeah. The other one that I've really enjoyed kind of following and watching is the folks at Taylor Telecom. They've got a really fun, they do a lot around short form vertical video. They did a fun one around the holiday time where they wrapped every single thing in their boss's office and their general manager's office they wrapped in wrapping paper and did kind of a fun little spoof on that, and that got a lot of great engagement as well. They've done a really good job with their posts. Zach, you were talking about kind of being on trend. They're definitely one who kind of leans into the trends that are happening on social and do some of those things within their own posts also. I've been really impressed with the things that they're doing. I would definitely recommend going to check them out as well, and look at some of the things they're doing, and especially as it relates to short form vertical content. They're definitely leaning in there, and I suspect they're probably going to be doing more of that now on Meta properties or
Hey,
YouTube Shorts in the future, given our conversation at the beginning of this podcast.
yeah, and this is the thing too. We talk about going back to Instagram and YouTube. There's always going to be another app, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm excited to see what's next here too, and where people go. But one of the things here, Gabe, we often talk about the trends, and I think we'll have a good episode on this later this month, sneak peek kind of thing. But there's a big focus here in 2025 with marketers ramping up their focus on millennials and Gen Z, and
Mm-hmm.
even last on our last episode, I said, hey, like the next generation is also going to be buying your products and services in the next 3 years or so too. But there was a study here, and they found that 70% of marketers um, plan to target millennials the most in 2025, which is going to be the largest audience or the largest group of decision makers. And behind millennials, the next biggest increase was Gen Z. So I think there's this very strategic focus on who's the next group or who's the next demographic to buy your products and who's buying them today, and how can we focus on these people specifically. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things here I kind of alluded to back when we were talking about brands interacting with people on like Twitter or Facebook and different apps like that was, if you see your brand is active in the comments or active in the replies, one of the things I think is going to be very impactful here moving forward, and in the past, if you haven't done this yet, is providing a level of customer service, customer support through social media. So, I mentioned, people on Reddit talking about your brand. Have an official brand account, jump in there and take care of the issue. The same on Twitter. I mean, I feel like I see this all the time on companies like United Airlines or really any airline. It's like, hey, I'm having this problem and I can't get a hold of anyone, and the brand just replies, right? Um, when I was in banking, one of the things we implemented was a chat service where you could use any app you could possibly think of, and it would route everything back to our like central location, and then we could triage from there. So you could tweet, you could DM on Facebook, you could text, you could use Apple Business Chat, RCS, you name it. You had the ability to reach out to our team who provide that same level of customer service. So I think there's a high level of being able to go in and support your customers through these social media apps that they're already using. And again, your brand being active, having that presence is only going to help position you even better.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that's a really smart way to leverage that. And it sort of leans into a little bit, Zach, around social listening and, tools that you can use to have a really good understanding of what comments are being made about your brand. And I'm not going to, like make an endorsement of a particular social listening tool. There's lots of them out there. But the point being is you can really start to lean into how are people talking about your brand, and then to your point, route those back to have a proper person respond, which is lovely. The other thing that I really thought was interesting that was talked about in a couple of those reports that you sent to me around social listening was not only setting up alerts for your brand, but also setting up alerts for your competitors. If your competitor is having a hard time around something, maybe it's a great opportunity to get a little bit more aggressive and time your marketing campaigns around your competitor stubbing their toe or stumbling a little bit. The other piece is you can start to get a really good idea of the problems that your prospects, in this case, are having with that competitor. And you can start to then lean your marketing copy, creative marketing campaigns, all of that into leverage those words, leverage those terms, leverage those pain points that those potential customers are talking about with a brand that they're engaging with now.
I I just think there's so much opportunity here with social media. In the thing going back to what we were talking about in the beginning here is it's constantly changing. It's constantly evolving into different platforms or different ways to access the platforms, different apps, different APIs. It's constantly evolving. So I think going back to what you're doing on these platforms and how you're using them, don't be static. Number one, use the platforms. Don't just post and I think the old saying was like, set it and forget it, or like, schedule content and forget about it. No, you don't want to do that. I mean, think back to the customer journey, Gabe. Like, we don't want to forget any component of this. So when you're using social media, be social, right? Like that's what it is. It's social media. So interacting with your customers, your other brands. I think that's a big one too. Is when you see brands interacting. I think Wendy's kind of sparked this one, but like these two, I don't know if they still do, but these two um, have it wasn't even a parody account, it was on their official account, but they would basically start fights with other brands kind of thing, like these digital tweets
That
back and
leans into
forth.
the unhinged area that we were talking about
Yeah,
earlier. They were
and
out of their minds.
yeah, and they would go on and like other brands would get involved, they would like be roasting each other, and it would generate so many views. And that's not to say like that strategy is going to work for everyone, it's
Right.
not going to work for everyone. So maybe not copy that one, but it's just an example of how you can take this unique approach. And I mean, for Wendy's, a fast food restaurant doing this was just like wild to me. And um,
Mm-hmm.
now it's something that I feel like most people know about. Oh, yeah, it's Wendy's on Twitter, as opposed to the ultra serious brand who's promoting their latest product and price. It's boring.
It's boring, and it's misaligned. To go back to your comment earlier about millennials, Gen Z, and even the generations below that, it's not how they want to engage with people,
It's
right?
not how they want to consume your content. It's not the content they
Correct.
want to see. There's a reason, TikTok became so popular with Gen Z, and my opinion, my hot take, it's because of the content that was on there, right? Um,
It's not just because you all have really short attention spans.
no, that's why we had Vine. That was a 6-second video.
Uh,
But yeah, like I said, Gabe, social media constantly adapting, constantly evolving. So you've got to move with it. And if there's one takeaway from the podcast today, I think I think being unique and being social on social media are two of the critical things you can do here in 2025.
I love that comment about being social on social media. That was something that really came out of the research reports that you had sent to me. Is you know it is called social media for a reason, right? Like, people they're going there for fun, they're going there for a distraction. If your brand is just constantly putting out boring content there, it's going to quickly get scrolled by, because that's not what people are going to social media for at all.
And think about email. I use the newspaper example of people just like typing things up and printing on a newspaper. Email's the same way. Email, you're a little limited in how engaging you can be and what you can do there. But social media, I feel like you've got a very, very big opportunity to have that engaging content
Well, it's an opportunity to interact with your customers. That's amazing, right? If you're never going to be able to have a personal conversation with all of your
in
customers.
real
It's
time. That's the big
exactly,
thing. We're not waiting for
exactly.
them to click a link. We're not ready waiting for them to call a phone number. They get on and they post, they comment. You can respond real time. So have that social media listening set up so you know what is happening with your brand. I mean,
Hmm.
that's if, this might just be me, but I think of even like Google alerts. Like if I'm a business or if I'm a broadband provider, I want to know everything that's happening online with my brand. If someone's having a negative experience, if someone's having a positive experience, let's grab that testimonial and share that with others. Or again, if it's on social media, other people will see this. So
Hmm.
how you respond is going to be key to how people interact and how people view your business.
No question. Yeah, no question.
Well, Gabe, it is now 9 a.m. So we made it through an episode. Is there anything else, Gabe, you want to add? I know we're all kinds of mixed around here with how we've done this podcast early in the morning today, but I think we had a good episode. I think the big thing this weekend is all eyes on TikTok. Like we said,
Hmm.
we won't dive too deep into that, but just keep thinking about those other platforms that your customers and their friends are going to be using and
Yeah.
how you're using them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that to me is the big takeaway here is, again, people are not going to stop consuming short form video. There's no question about that. It's just what application are they going to move to do that? And then the other piece is, again, remembering that it's why it's so important to have this direct conversations and direct relationship with your customers, so that as these applications change, as algorithms change, that you're not at the mercy of, oh crap, we were getting all of our dollars through this application and now it no longer exists and now my business is scrambling. So using the tools that exist from a social media perspective to build those direct relationships is, really the best way to be successful as you move forward as a business.
Yes, and thank you for tuning into Buffering. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues. And for more insights and updates, be sure to connect with Gabe and I on LinkedIn.